In the space between sleep and waking, between consciousness and the void, Sarah walked through corridors that shouldn't exist. Today, while Sarah lay unconscious in her hospital bed, 2 weeks since that terrible night at the cemetery, the Wellington Hills Sanatorium spread around her in its 1960s incarnation. Freshly painted walls that would later peel, bright lights that would eventually shatter, the sounds of daily operations that would one day fall silent forever. Sarah moved like a ghost through the memories embedded in the building's bones, watching scenes play out with horrifying clarity. Patients strapped to tables, their eyes wide with chemically induced terror. Dr. Cowley, younger but with the same cold intelligence that would later consume her brother, taking meticulous notes as he exposed his subjects to calculated psychological torments. "Fear," she heard his voice echo through the spectral halls, "is the most primal energy source, pure, renewable, and infinitely amplifiable under the right conditions." Sarah watched him collect the psychic residue of terror, watching it condense into those glowing samples they'd found at Zare's decades later. She saw him feed this concentrated fear to something that writhed in the shadows of the deepest basement, something that grew stronger and more coherent with each offering. Then, the scene shifted. She was no longer an observer. She was strapped to one of those tables. Dr. Cowley's face looming over her with clinical detachment. "You understand now, don't you, granddaughter?" His voice carried the weight of decades. "This was always meant to be a family legacy. Your mother escaped, but blood calls to blood, and your brother, he's so very receptive to suggestion." Sarah tried to speak, to move, but found herself trapped in the nightmare logic of this place between worlds. "He thinks he's learning to control the entity to save your mother," Cowley continued, his instruments gleaming in the harsh light. "But every moment he spends with my research, every time he touches the knowledge I've left behind, he becomes a little less himself and a little more me." "No," Sarah finally managed to whisper. Cowley smiled, and for a moment she saw not the elderly doctor, but something far older and more malevolent wearing his face. "You're powerless here, child, just as your grandmother was powerless, just as your mother was powerless to stop the cancer that's been eating her alive. A parting gift from dear old Dad." But as he spoke, Sarah felt something stirring within her. Not fear, but a fierce protective rage that had been growing since Halloween night. "You're wrong." Her voice carried an authority that made the spectral laboratory flicker. "I'm not powerless, and neither was my grandmother. That's why you had to kill her, because she was fighting back." Sarah's eyes snapped open with the sudden violence of someone breaking through the surface of deep water. The heart monitor beside her bed erupted in rapid beeps as her vital signs spiked. Jason nearly fell out of his chair, startling awake from his vigil. "Charles," was the first word she spoke, her voice hoarse from 2 weeks of silence. "Where is Charles?" The nurse rushed in, alerted by the monitor alarms, but Sarah was already trying to sit up. Her green eyes wide with an urgency that made Jason's blood run cold. "Sarah, you've been unconscious for 2 weeks. You need to," Jason said, reaching for her hand. 2 weeks? The color drained from her face. Oh God, how much time does he have left? Jason didn't understand the question, but something in her tone made him afraid to ask for clarification. Sarah's eyes darted around the room, taking in details with sharp focus. "Where's my mother? Is she—" "Hospice," Jason said quietly. "The cancer got worse, really fast. Charles he's been handling it better than anyone expected." Sarah's voice was bitter and terrified. "He's not handling it. He's not even Charles anymore, is he? The nurse was checking Sarah's pupils with a penlight, clearly confused by the girl's immediate lucidity after such a prolonged unconscious state. "Miss, I need to call the doctor. Your awakening is quite unusual." "How long?" Sarah interrupted, grabbing Jason's wrist with surprising strength. "How long since Charles started acting different? Really different?" Jason thought back over the past 10 days. Maybe since New Year's Day, after your mom went into hospice. That's when the talking to himself really started. And like I told your mom, sometimes it sounds like someone's talking back to him. Sarah closed her eyes, and Jason could see her calculating something terrible in her head. "We have to get to him," she said, swinging her legs over the side of the hospital bed despite the nurse's protests. "Right now, before it's too late." "Sarah, what did you see? What happened to you?" She looked at him with eyes that had witnessed horrors beyond anything they'd experienced in the real world. "I saw our grandfather," she said simply, "and he told me exactly what he's doing to Charles." They found Charles in Eleanor's hospice room, sitting beside her bed with an old leather journal open in his lap. The same journal he'd taken from Zare's, but now filled with additional notes in handwriting that seemed to shift between his boyish scrawl and something more mature, more controlled. Sarah stopped short in the doorway, her breath catching at the sight of her mother. She'd known Eleanor was declining, but seeing her so frail against the stark white sheets, her vibrant energy completely drained, crashed over Sarah like a wave. And there was Charles, calmly reading from that cursed journal as if their mother wasn't dying just feet away. Eleanor was sleeping, her breathing shallow but peaceful. Charles looked up as Sarah, Jason, Mike, Lisa, and Chris crowded into the room, and Sarah's heart sank. Fury and helplessness warred within her as tears welled in her eyes, one trailing down her cheek. Her mother was dying, her brother was lost to their grandfather's evil, and she felt utterly powerless to stop any of it. His blue eyes held a depth that hadn't been there before, an intelligence that seemed to look through her rather than at her. "Sister," he said, and even that single word carried an inflection that was wrong, too formal, too measured. "I'm glad you finally awakened. We have much to discuss." Sarah fought down the urge to run. This was still her brother. She could see Charles underneath whatever was happening to him, but she could also see something else looking out through his eyes, something that studied the group with clinical interest. "Charles," she said carefully, "we need to talk, alone." "Of course," he replied, closing the journal with deliberate care. "There's so much you need to understand about our family's legacy." He stood, and Sarah noticed that his movements had changed too, more precise, less of the nervous energy that had always characterized her anxious, younger brother. As they walked into the hallway, leaving the others with Eleanor, Sarah felt as if she were being led by a stranger wearing Charles's face. "You spoke with him, didn't you?" "In your dreams," Charles said once they were out of earshot. "Grandfather was always proud of the women in our family, so much more resistant to his influence than the men. It's why he had to be more direct with grandmother." The casual way he spoke about their grandmother's murder made Sarah's skin crawl. This wasn't Charles talking, or if it was Charles filtered through something ancient and malevolent. "How much of you is left?" she asked quietly, wiping the tear from a cheek. Charles, or the thing wearing his face, smiled with genuine warmth that somehow made the expression even more terrifying. "Enough," he said, "enough to know that what I'm becoming is the only way to save her." He gestured toward Eleanor's room. "The knowledge grandfather left behind, the understanding of how fear and life force interact, it's all there, Sarah. I can stop the cancer. I can give her years more life." "At what cost?" at the cost of one 14-year-old boy who was going to die anyway, Charles replied with chilling pragmatism. Sarah felt tears burning her eyes as she realized how far the possession had already progressed. Her brother, the real Charles, was still in there somewhere, but he was drowning in something much older and stronger than himself. "There has to be another way," she whispered. "There is no other way," came the reply, but for just a moment Sarah heard her brother's voice break through the controlled facade. "She's dying, Sarah. Every day I can feel her slipping away, and I'm the only one who can stop it, even if it means I won't be me anymore." And in that moment, Sarah understood the true horror of what their grandfather had done. He hadn't just possessed Charles, he'd manipulated him into cooperating. Back in Eleanor's room, the other four teens sat in uncomfortable silence, each processing what they'd witnessed. Charles's transformation was undeniable now. The way he moved, spoke, even breathed had changed over the past 2 weeks. "He's not just being influenced," Mike said quietly, his voice heavy with the weight of realization. "He's being replaced." Eleanor stirred at the sound of voices, her green eyes opening with effort. When she saw the four teenagers gathered around her bed, a look of profound sadness crossed her features. "How bad is it?" she asked, and they all knew she wasn't talking about her cancer. "Bad," Jason replied honestly. "Sarah says she spoke with him, your father, and Charles. He's not fighting it anymore." Eleanor closed her eyes, and for a moment she looked every one of her years plus many more. "I should have told them the truth from the beginning, should have prepared them for this." "What can we do?" Lisa asked, her voice small and frightened. "How do you fight something like this?" Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of a decision that had been building for decades. "I can only think of one way to break this possession," she said finally. "The entity, my father's consciousness, it's tied to this family bloodline. It feeds on our fear, grows stronger through our connections to each other. To break that connection..." She didn't finish the sentence, but they all understood. The same understanding that had driven her mother to fight back all those years ago. "No," Mike said immediately. "There has to be another way. The blood tie has to be severed," Eleanor continued, her voice growing stronger with resolve. "And I'm the one with the most direct connection to the source. I'm dying anyway. This cancer isn't random, you know. I've been fighting it for months, my father's final revenge for the daughter who escaped." Through the doorway, they could see Sarah and Charles in intense conversation. "When the moment comes," Eleanor said, gripping Jason's hand with surprising strength, "I need you to promise me something. Promise me you'll get Sarah out of there. Whatever happens next, she can't see it. She can't carry that burden." She paused, studying his face. "I've seen how you look at her, Jason. Don't let fear stop you from telling her how you feel. She'll need someone who truly cares about her." Jason wanted to argue, wanted to find another solution, but looking at Eleanor's determined face, he realized that some battles had been decided long before they'd ever set foot in Zares. Outside, Sarah was learning just how little time they had left. "He's planning something for tonight," Sarah told the group when she returned to Eleanor's room, her voice barely above a whisper. "At midnight, Charles thinks he's found a way to cure Mom's cancer, but he's being used. It's going to drain what's left of her life and complete the possession permanently." Eleanor reached for Sarah's hand, pulling her close. "Listen to me, sweetheart. What I told the others about breaking the blood tie, I meant it. But it has to be my choice, my sacrifice. If I don't make it willingly, then Charles will be lost forever." "Mom, no," Sarah said, tears finally spilling over. "There has to be another way. The only other way is to let your brother disappear completely. Eleanor replied gently, "and I won't let that happen." Jason stood at the window, watching the darkness settle over the hospice grounds. In a few hours, Charles would return, but it wouldn't really be Charles anymore. It would be Dr. Benedict Cowley wearing his grandson's face, armed with decades of supernatural knowledge and a young, healthy body to continue his terrible work. "How long do we have?" Mike asked. Sarah checked the clock on the wall, 9 p.m. He said, "Midnight," because of course it does. Every terrible thing that's happened to us has begun at the stroke of 12. Jason looked at the clock himself, feeling the weight of those 3 hours stretching ahead of them. 3 hours to say goodbye to Charles. 3 hours before Eleanor would sacrifice herself to save what remained of her son's soul. And somewhere in the building, Charles sat alone in a quiet room, no longer quite himself, planning what he believed was his mother's salvation, a ritual that would unwittingly complete his grandfather's decades-long plan for immortality. As night fell over Maplewood Hospice, the final act of Dr. Benedict Cowley's legacy was about to begin.